Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be a half wrap up for the month of June. So there will be several Pride reads, but also a few other reads. Non-Pride related reads first, although the reason that I picked up both of these books is because I was searching the author of one of the queer graphic novels that I read and trying to see if they had done any other novels. There is one graphic novel by this person that my library has that's on my TBR, so we'll see that later in the month. Ruined by Sarah Vaughn, Nikki Smith, and Sarah Winifred Surley. Sarah Winifred Surley is the person I first looked up their name to see if they had done any other projects, and this was one of the ones that came up. This is a graphic novel. Here's a panel from fairly early on. That is a arranged marriage between a man and a woman in, it looks like Regency era because they all have the dresses that have the empire waistlines, and it's, I would say, novella length if it were in prose form because of how much story is told, but it's a chunky one because it takes a lot longer to tell a story with pictures, page time wise. And I really like this. It's really sweet. I really love an arranged marriage where the people are like kind to each other and just try to make the best of things, and eventually fall for each other because it is a romance. And it's called Ruined because our main characters were both ruined in different ways. The guy, his is very impoverished. His father and then brother kind of spent all the estate's money and things were crumbling around them. So he had a hard time finding a match except with a woman who was also ruined, in her case, by having been found out for having sex with someone she wasn't married to. It's not like she was having an affair or anything. She wasn't married, and if she had not been rich and had a giant dowry, she couldn't even have married him. So, yeah. Compared to Patience and Esther, which I'll talk about in a moment, this was not very spicy. It was like there were nude pictures of people, but I would not say, like, nothing very specific was happening. It also has a character with what appears to be agoraphobia, the fear of going outside, which is heavily connected to social anxiety and the fear of encountering people outside. So as someone who has social anxiety and, anxiety in general, it was very good to see that. Then we have Chubby Bunny, which the story is by an author I've read from before, Julie Murphy, who does a lot of romances with Fat Rep. And this is a picture book with Fat Rep, and the kid is probably 9 to 10. The illustrator is Sarah Winifred Surley again. And this story is about a girl whose nickname is Bunny because she is the daughter of someone whose legal name is Barbara, who goes by Babs, and her grandmother is also called Barbara. Bunny's legal name is also Barbara, so they all have different nicknames, and our main character also has a pet bunny, and she loves being called Bunny. She puts her hair in little buns that she calls bunny buns, and she just really is living a great life until one day she goes to school and plays the game Chubby Bunny, which is where you stuff marshmallows in your mouth and try to say Chubby Bunny, and the kids start making fun of her for being a chubby bunny. And so it goes through how she tries to redirect their attention to things about her other than her chubbiness, and then how she gets advice from her grandma about how there's nothing wrong with being chubby by boosting her own self-esteem and showing that calling her that won't make her have hurt feelings anymore, as well as talking to her classmates about, we all have things about us that are different, like being tall or wearing glasses, and that's all fine. It doesn't really go into the systemic oppression of fat people, but I think it goes at it in a way that is accessible for the age range that it's aimed at, so I think that it's really well done. 5 stars to this one and 4 stars to Ruined. So the book that I actually first found was Patience and Esther by S.W. Surley, and I really liked it, so that's why I looked up their other works. And it is a graphic novel that is a period piece, kind of like Ruined, It might be a little later on, I would say, more late 1800s. It is about a British Indian woman and a either Northern England or Scottish woman who are both servants, one of whom is a little higher up in the servant hierarchy. She often stands in as a lady's maid, whereas our Scottish character is a brand new housemaid. And so it follows them being roomed together and starting to form crushes on each other, and helping each other out. The more experienced character being a bit of a mentor for a brand new character, and then follows them for quite a while after they've fallen in love, and their continuing love story and how they make a life together. It brings up them going to suffragette rallies and learning about the sort of different sectors of the suffragettes in the UK at the time, which there were the upper class women and then there were the working class women, and how they went at things kind of differently, and how the upper class meetings excluded the working class women most of the time. It was also just generally very sweet. There was a lot of queer community to be found. If you knew where to look, the queer people really stuck together, and also there was some really accepting family that was really precious. It was very romantic and very sweet, but also very spicy, unexpectedly spicy. Partially because, although I would say I've read romance books that were that spicy, that weren't even necessarily erotica books, but a picture's worth 1,000 words, basically. So seeing those things portrayed was more than just hearing them described, basically because my imagination is not that vivid. If you have the scale of like people who can't imagine pictures to people who imagine pictures in great detail, I'm about in the middle. People who can't see pictures being having aphantasia, I believe it's called. Anyway, I really liked it. 5 stars. Looking forward to the other book I have on my TBR by this author. Then we have The Otherwoods. This is a middle grade, and it was on that list from Pagebound. And it looks pretty creepy on the cover, and that pretty well describes what's going on in the book. There are various monsters in the story, that being described as physically grotesque-looking creatures as opposed to actually horrible people monsters. There's some of those too, but they aren't like called monsters in the book. As you can see, the main character has their cat on their shoulders, and the cat accompanies the main character throughout their adventure, and I really loved the cat character. Basically, the Otherwoods, which is a sort of monster realm, has been trying to kidnap/lure our main character River into the Otherwoods for most of their childhood. And now River has a crush on a girl, and the girl gets kidnapped as a way to lure River in. So River takes their cat on this adventure into the Otherwoods, basically because the monster under their bed tells them to. And the cat is badass and has kind of special anti-spirit powers. And yeah, it's a good adventure story. Creepy adventure story, if you like those, which a fair amount of kids do. And it talks a little bit about deadnaming and misgendering that is done to River by a teacher, how that feels, and it also talks about River really valuing older queer people to kind of show them that you can go through all of life being queer and it's okay. It's by Justine Buchella Winans, 4.5 stars. Then we have Wrong Answers Only by Tobias Madden. This author is Australian, and so is the main character. This main character has anxiety, but he has a lot of trouble admitting that. He has kind of been perfect his whole life and has been like on a one track for his career that he wants, and he feels like he has to be perfect in order to achieve that career, which is kind of true. There is a lot of ableism in the medical and especially, I'm sure, surgical community because he wants to be a surgeon. He's also gay, and he came out, I think, a couple of years before this takes place, and his family was supportive. But there is an uncle who has been estranged from the family since he was a young adult, and when our main character starts having panic attacks, it's clear he can't go to school like this because he has a panic attack whenever he starts to think about college. So his grandmother comes up with the idea to send him to see his uncle to have a rest, basically, for a while, because he's also not getting a rest at home because everybody's kind of badgering him about this panic attack thing. And so off he goes to meet his uncle. And his uncle is very nice. He also happens to have a friend who works on cruise ships. His uncle is a cruise ship staff captain, so it's like right below the main captain of a ship. He has a best friend who works on ships, and maybe they might actually run into each other. And that's really sweet. I really like in here the value that's put on platonic relationships, familial, and also he refers to his best friend, who's a woman, as his soulmate. And I think that's really beautiful and wonderful, and I really like where that storyline and relationship goes. And it's a lot about him avoiding thinking about his anxiety, but also having a chance to mess things up, basically in a way that's away from home and away from college, so he doesn't feel like it's going to mess up his career track. The thing that I kind of surprisingly liked about this, I usually don't even like contemporaries that much, but I like this one, is that our main character messes up quite a bit, and in quite a bit of ways that are predictable, like, did you think that was going to end well? And I didn't mind because in this context, he wasn't hurting anybody else very much. He hurt some people emotionally, but like in a fantasy book per se or a sci-fi, a lot of times teenagers' bad decisions end up like costing people their lives, and predictably we're going to cost people their lives or something big like that. But in this contemporary, he's just hurting a couple people emotionally and not even in irretrievable ways. He's just kind of being a dick. And I liked that. I liked seeing a teenager behave in predictably teenagery ways. And it was okay because unlike in a lot of higher stakes stories, he didn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders with people being in big trouble if he made the wrong decisions. Also, because there are a fair number of queer characters, the book was able to have some of the queer characters be total dicks without implying that all queer people are dicks. So I think that was really well done, and I gave it 5 stars. There are a couple spoilery things I'd like to talk about, so I'm going to do that now, and I'll give you a time code to skip to if you'd like to avoid those spoilers. So first of all, I guessed that the uncle was gay, and that was the reason for the family separation fairly early on. I also guessed that he was in a relationship with the grumpy first mate, and I really liked the way that that was handled, partially because I had grandparents with similar dynamics to what apparently was had by the main character's grandparents, where one of them was a bad person, and the other one seemed like not a bad person, except that they did nothing to rein in their bad person spouse, which I think happened a lot in the sort of era that the main character's grandparents and my grandparents were about the same era would have lived in, because it was very important to not challenge your spouse or to specifically not get divorced. And if they had gone all the way that they needed to prevent the abuses that their spouse was carrying out, they would have had to get a divorce. So in the case of the book, the grandfather kicked out the uncle for being gay, and the mom did nothing to stop him. In my case of my grandparents, my grandma was the kind of person who would have done that, and my grandpa though I have had a fairly good relationship with him and he's a lot nicer, he would have done nothing. There's also a case where similar things happened, or there were similar dynamics in other parts of my extended family as well. So I liked how that was looked at, because that's the thing that a lot of us have to reckon with, our grandparents having those kinds of dynamics and being like, well, I love this one grandparent, but also they don't love me enough to challenge my other grandparent, while also recognizing what it would have cost them to divorce their spouse in those times. Especially in my family, Christian community, same in the main character's family. But I did take comfort in thinking about, if my dad kicked me out for being gay or for being disabled, my mom would divorce him in a hot minute. Yeah, it was really good, and I really liked the discussion of those topics. Also, the fact that he was going to move in with his soulmate best friend and have a little queer found family thing, even though she is not even queer, but she would place his relationship above romantic relationships, is beautiful, and I love it so much. So the other book that I read was Sipping Dom Perignon Through a Straw, and I have a full review of that up on my channel, so I'll link that below if you'd like to watch. And those are the 6 books I've read in the first 11 days of June. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, which will probably be a vlog of my time at the beach. Bye!